The transport ship Meridian's edge hummed through hyperspace, carrying its mixed cargo of military personnel toward the contested border worlds. In the cramped quarters of Delta's section, tension crackled like static electricity between species that had learned to tolerate each other's presence, but never truly trust. Lieutenant Sarah Chun sat in the corner, her slight frame dwarfed by the towering forms of her alien squadmates. At barely 5 feet 4 inches, she looked almost childlike next to the 8-foot Krillian warriors with their chitinous armor plating, or the hulking Vorthak whose muscles rippled beneath leathery, blue-gray skin. Her regulation uniform hung loose on her small frame, and her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that revealed the pale skin of her neck. The other humans in the unit gave her sideways glances, some sympathetic, others dismissive. She was the newest addition to Strike Team Omega, a joint species rapid response unit that handled the galaxy's most dangerous missions. Everyone knew she hadn't earned her place through the normal channels. Word was that some desk jockey back on Earth had pulled strings, maybe called in favors from when humanity first joined the Galactic Defense Coalition 5 years ago. "Look at that," growled Thexmore, a Krillian whose mandibles clicked with amusement. His translated voice carried through the universal communicators they all wore. "They send us a little human female for our next mission." "What's she supposed to do?" "Ask the enemy nicely to surrender." A few of the other aliens chittered their equivalent of laughter. Even some of the human soldiers smirked. Sarah kept her eyes focused on the datapad in her hands, reading through mission briefings and tactical assessments. She'd learned long ago that responding to taunts only made things worse. "I heard she's never even seen combat," added Corvex, a Vorthak whose scarred hide told the story of dozens of battles. Fresh out of some cushy Earth Academy, probably never held a real weapon. The comments continued, each one designed to chip away at her confidence. They questioned her training, her qualifications, her right to be there among warriors who had bled for the Coalition. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her silence. She'd endured worse during her years of preparation for this moment. What none of them knew was that Sarah Chun carried secrets that could redefine their understanding of human capability. The loose uniform hid not just her small stature, but also the intricate tattoo that covered her entire back. It wasn't decorative art or some youthful mistake. It was a map, coded in a language that predated human civilization, marking locations across the galaxy that held significance beyond anything the Coalition had yet discovered. The tattoo had been burned into her skin during 7 years of the most classified training program in human history. While her official record showed her graduating from the Mars Military Academy 18 months ago, the truth was far more complex. She had spent those missing years in facilities that didn't appear on any government documentation, learning skills that went beyond conventional warfare. "Maybe we should have them send her back before she gets hurt," suggested Marcus Webb, one of the human members of the team. He was trying to sound protective, but Sarah could hear the condescension in his voice. "This isn't a place for someone who looks like she'd blow away in a strong wind." Sarah finally looked up from her datapad, meeting Marcus's gaze with steady brown eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom. "I appreciate your concern," she said quietly, "but I can handle myself." Her voice was soft, almost gentle, which only seemed to amuse them more. Thexmore's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Krillian equivalent of hearty laughter. "Handle yourself? Against what? A paperwork emergency." The transport shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace, and the overhead speakers crackled to life. "All personnel, prepare for arrival at Forward Base Titan. Mission briefing in Conference Room Alpha in 30 minutes. As the team began to gather their gear, Sarah stood and shouldered her pack with fluid, practiced movements. The way she handled her equipment was different from the others, more precise, more economical. Every motion served a purpose, wasted no energy. But the aliens were too busy laughing at her expense to notice. Forward Base Titan was a joint coalition facility built into a massive asteroid, its surface bristling with defense platforms and docking bays. The base served as a staging area for operations in the contested Outer Rim, where pirate fleets and rogue alien factions challenged coalition authority. It was a place where only the most elite units were stationed, which made Sarah's presence there all the more puzzling to her teammates. The docking bay was a cavern of metal and energy filled with ships of a dozen different designs reflecting the varied species that made up the coalition. Maintenance crews scurried about, their forms ranging from the insectoid Chithari to the gaseous ethereals who floated in specially designed containment suits. The air thrummed with the constant activity of a military base at war. Strike Team Omega disembarked and made their way through corridors lined with duraplast and humming with the energy of fusion reactors buried deep in the asteroid's core. Other military personnel moved past them with purpose, some offering nods of recognition to the seasoned warriors of the team, while their eyes slid past Sarah as if she were invisible. The conference room was stark and functional, dominated by a holographic display table that could project three-dimensional tactical information. Commander Voxtel, a four-armed Zenthari with silver scales and eyes like molten gold, was already waiting for them. His species was known for their strategic brilliance and had provided many of the Coalition's finest military minds. Strike Team Omega. Commander Voxtel's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect across a dozen star systems. You have been selected for a mission of utmost importance. 3 days ago, we lost contact with Research Station Echo 7, located in the Martin system. The holographic display activated, showing a star map with Echo 7's position marked in pulsing red. The station appeared to be a standard research facility, but Sarah's enhanced training allowed her to spot details the others missed. The station's position, its energy signatures, the way it was shielded, all pointed to something far more significant than routine research. Echo 7 was conducting classified experiments, Voxtel continued. The nature of these experiments is above your security clearance, but understand that the information contained within that station must not fall into hostile hands. Your mission is to investigate the loss of communication, secure any survivors, and, if necessary, ensure that no sensitive materials are compromised. Thexmore leaned forward, his mandibles clicking with interest. What kind of resistance should we expect, Commander? Unknown. The last transmission from Echo 7 was garbled, but intelligence suggests possible pirate activity in the sector. The Crimson Fleet has been increasingly bold in their attacks on Coalition assets. Sarah studied the tactical display with the trained eye of someone who understood the broader implications of such missions. The Crimson Fleet wasn't just a collection of pirates. They were a sophisticated organization with access to advanced technology and intelligence networks. If they had indeed targeted Echo 7, it meant they knew something valuable was there. The mission parameters are straightforward, Voxtel continued. Infiltrate the station, assess the situation, complete the objectives. Transport will be provided by stealth frigate Shadow's Edge. Departure is in 4 hours. As the briefing concluded and the team began to file out, Sarah remained behind. She approached Commander Voxtel with quiet confidence that seemed at odds with her unremarkable appearance. Commander, she said softly, I'd like to review the full tactical specifications for Echo 7's defensive systems. Voxtel's golden eyes fixed on her with new interest. There was something about the way she asked, a certainty that she would be granted access to information well above her apparent pay grade. That information is classified, Lieutenant Chun. Understand, sir. But if we're going into an unknown situation, every advantage could mean the difference between mission success and failure. For a moment, something passed between them, a recognition that Sarah was not quite what she appeared to be. Voxtel's 4 hands moved over his command console, accessing files that required multiple levels of security clearance. Very well, Lieutenant. But this information does not leave this room. The holographic display shifted, revealing Echo 7's true nature. It wasn't just a research station. It was a black site facility conducting experiments on recovered alien technology that predated known galactic civilization. The artifacts being studied there could potentially revolutionize everything from faster-than-light travel to weapons technology. Sarah absorbed the information with the focused intensity of someone trained to process and retain vast amounts of classified data. Her mind was already formulating contingency plans, identifying potential complications, calculating probabilities. This was what she had been prepared for during those 7 lost years of training. "Thank you, Commander," she said simply, then turned and left the briefing room. As she walked through the corridors of Forward Base Titan, Sarah could hear her teammates discussing the mission ahead. Their conversation was filled with bravado and speculation about the glory they might earn in combat. They had no idea they were about to embark on something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the galaxy and their place in it. In her assigned quarters, a small cubicle barely large enough for a bunk and storage locker, Sarah began her pre-mission preparations. She checked her equipment with methodical precision, each item serving multiple purposes that weren't immediately obvious. Her standard-issue sidearm had been modified in subtle ways that enhanced its performance beyond regulation specifications. Her tactical vest contained components that could be assembled into devices not found in any military manual. But it was when she removed her uniform shirt that her true nature became visible. The tattoo covering her back was a masterpiece of hidden information, its intricate patterns containing star charts, mathematical formulas, and symbols from a dozen different civilizations. At its center was a representation of Earth, but not as it appeared to modern humanity. This was Earth as it had existed in an age before recorded history, when humanity's ancestors had walked among the stars. The tattoo told a story that would have shocked even the Coalition's highest-ranking officials. Humanity's introduction to galactic civilization 5 years ago had not been their first contact with the stars. Deep in Earth's past, humans had been part of something greater, something that had been deliberately hidden from modern knowledge. Sarah was a product of a program designed to rediscover that lost heritage and prepare for its eventual revelation. As she prepared for sleep before the mission, Sarah's mind wandered to the training facility hidden beneath the Australian outback, where she and others like her had learned to unlock capabilities that most humans never dreamed possible. They had been taught to push their bodies beyond normal limitations, to access mental abilities that bordered on the supernatural, and to serve as bridges between humanity's forgotten past and its uncertain future. The other members of Strike Team Omega slept peacefully in their quarters, confident in their abilities and secure in their understanding of the universe. They had no way of knowing that the smallest, quietest member of their team carried within her the potential to change everything they believed about humanity's place among the stars. Tomorrow would bring them face to face with mysteries that stretch back millions of years, and Sarah Chen would be forced to reveal just how little any of them truly knew about the species that had seemed so weak and unremarkable when they first joined the Galactic Defense Coalition. The Shadow's Edge waited in the docking bay, its sleek black hull designed to slip through space undetected. Within hours, they would be racing toward a confrontation that would test not just their combat skills, but their ability to comprehend truths that challenge the very foundation of galactic civilization. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the familiar weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. Everything she had trained for, everything she had sacrificed, had led to this moment. The mocking voices of her teammates still echoed in her memory, but soon those same voices would speak her name with respect born of awe and perhaps a touch of fear. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had been underestimated in ways that none of them could yet imagine. The Shadow's Edge cut through hyperspace like a blade through silk, its experimental stealth technology rendering it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. The ship was a marvel of Coalition engineering, incorporating design elements from a dozen different species to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Its crew was handpicked for this type of mission, specialists who understood the value of discretion and the cost of failure. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, her weathered features reflecting years of dangerous missions along the frontier. She had requested strike Team Omega specifically, knowing their reputation for handling impossible situations. What she hadn't expected was to find someone like Sarah Chun among their ranks. There was something about the young woman that didn't fit the profile of a typical Special Forces operative. She was too quiet, too self-contained, moving through the ship with a purposefulness that seemed almost supernatural. When Vasquez had reviewed the team roster, Chen's file had been notably sparse, filled with redacted sections and security classifications that even a ship's captain couldn't access. In the ship's armory, Strike Team Omega conducted final equipment checks. The space was cramped but efficiently organized, walls lined with weapons, and gear designed for a variety of combat scenarios. Each species had their preferred tools of war, from Krillian plasma projectors to Vorthack kinetic hammers. "Chun, what's your weapon preference?" asked Marcus Webb, trying to sound professional despite his obvious skepticism about her capabilities. "We have standard-issue plasma rifles, or, if you prefer something with less recoil." Sarah examined the weapon rack with the eye of someone who understood not just how to use these tools, but how they were constructed and what modifications might improve their performance. Her fingers traced along the barrel of a plasma rifle, noting the magnetic containment systems and energy distribution networks. "This will do," she said simply, selecting a rifle that looked identical to all the others. What the team couldn't see were the subtle adjustments she made as she handled the weapon, minor calibrations that optimized its performance for her specific combat style. Fexmore watched her with undisguised amusement. "You sure you know how to use that thing, little human? It's not like the training simulators you're probably used to." Sarah's response was to field strip the rifle with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, her hands disassembling and reassembling the weapon in seconds. When she finished, the rifle hummed with improved efficiency, its energy signature noticeably more stable than before. The aliens fell silent, processing what they had just witnessed. That level of familiarity with coalition military hardware required years of training and hands-on experience. Marcus Webb's eyes narrowed as he tried to reconcile what he'd seen with Sarah's official record. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked quietly. "Academy training," Sarah replied, but her tone suggested the conversation was closed. Corvex, the scarred Vorthack warrior, leaned closer. "I've trained recruits from a dozen academies across the Coalition. None of them could do what you just did." Before Sarah could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel to stations. We're approaching the Marden system. Stealth protocols are now in effect." The team made their way to the mission briefing room, where Captain Vasquez waited with a three-dimensional star map showing their destination. Echo 7 appeared as a small metallic station orbiting a gas giant whose stormy surface swirled with unnatural colors. "We'll be dropping out of hyperspace in 30 minutes, Vasquez announced. Initial scans suggest the station is intact, but showing no signs of active power systems. There are also several unidentified ship signatures in the vicinity, possibly pirates or scavengers. Sarah studied the tactical display with intense focus. Something about Echo 7's position bothered her, a nagging sense that its orbital mechanics weren't quite right. The station was too precisely placed, its trajectory too perfect for a simple research facility. "Captain," she said quietly, "has anyone considered that Echo 7 might not be what it appears to be?" All eyes turned to her, some curious, others annoyed at the interruption from the team's newest member. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The orbital parameters are wrong for a research station. The position provides perfect gravitational shielding from long-range sensors, and the energy signatures suggest passive systems that are far more advanced than anything in our current technology base." Commander Voxtel had briefed her on Echo 7's true nature, but Sarah couldn't reveal that information without compromising operational security. Instead, she had to guide them toward the truth through careful observation and logical deduction. Vasquez pulled up additional sensor data, her expression growing more thoughtful as she processed Sarah's analysis. "You're right. These readings don't match standard coalition construction patterns." The mood in the room shifted as the implications sank in. If Echo 7 wasn't what it appeared to be, then their mission parameters might be completely wrong. They weren't just investigating a lost research station. They were potentially dealing with something far more significant and dangerous. Change of approach, Vasquez decided. We'll conduct a full reconnaissance sweep before attempting boarding. I want to know what we're dealing with before anyone sets foot on that station. As the team prepared for the mission ahead, Sarah felt the familiar tingle of enhanced awareness that came with activating her deeper training. Her heart rate slowed, her breathing became more controlled, and her perception sharpened beyond normal human limits. This was the first stage of abilities that had been carefully cultivated during those 7 missing years. The Shadow's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Martin system, its stealth systems immediately engaging to mask their presence. The view screen showed Echo 7 in the distance, a gleaming structure that seemed almost elegant against the turbulent backdrop of the gas giant. "Sensor sweep complete," reported the ship's science officer, a thin Zenthri whose 4 arms danced over her control console with practiced precision. "I'm reading 3 ships in the vicinity of the station. Configuration suggests Crimson Fleet raiders, but they're powered down and showing minimal life signs." "Pirates," growled Thexmore, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Finally, something we can sink our teeth into." Sarah continued to study the tactical display, her enhanced training allowing her to process multiple layers of information simultaneously. The raider ships weren't randomly positioned. They were arrayed in a defensive pattern that suggested they were protecting something rather than preparing to attack. "Captain, I recommend extreme caution," she said. "This doesn't feel like a typical pirate operation." Marcus Webb shot her an irritated look. "Since when do pirates have feelings? They're criminals, Chun. They take what they want and kill anyone who gets in their way." But Captain Vasquez was beginning to trust the young woman's instincts. There was something about Sarah Chun that suggested depths of experience that her file didn't reflect. "What are you thinking, Lieutenant? The pirates arrived before us, but they haven't looted the station or destroyed it. Instead, they're maintaining a perimeter. That suggests they either can't access whatever they're after or they're waiting for something." The implications hung in the air like a threat. If the Crimson Fleet was waiting for something, it meant Echo 7 held secrets valuable enough to risk a prolonged operation in Coalition space. And if they couldn't access those secrets, it suggested the station's defenses were still partially active. "Boarding protocols are changed," Vasquez announced. "Full tactical approach. Lieutenant Chun, you'll take point on electronic warfare and systems analysis." The assignment surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. Taking point meant being first through the breach, facing whatever dangers waited inside Echo 7. It was a position typically reserved for the most experienced and capable team members, not the newest recruit. "Captain," with respect, Marcus Webb interjected, "Chen hasn't been tested in actual combat. Maybe someone with more experience should—" "The assignment stands," Vasquez cut him off. "Lieutenant Chun has demonstrated the best understanding of the situation so far. I want her insights available immediately when we board." As the team prepared for insertion, Sarah made final checks of her equipment. Hidden beneath her standard gear were items that wouldn't be found in any military supply catalog. Micro devices that could interface with technology far older than the Coalition, tools designed to unlock secrets that predated known galactic civilization. The tattoo on her back seemed to pulse with warmth, responding to proximity to something significant. Sarah had learned to trust these sensations during her training. They were indicators that the ancient knowledge encoded in her skin was relevant to her current situation. "Insertion in 10 minutes, announced the ship's pilot. "We'll deploy via stealth pod directly to the station's maintenance bay." Once aboard, You're on your own until extraction. Strike Team Omega gathered in the deployment bay, their figures imposing in full combat armor. Sarah looked almost fragile beside them, her smaller frame making her appear even younger than her years. But there was something about the way she carried herself that was beginning to catch their attention, a coiled readiness that spoke of hidden capabilities. The stealth pod was a cramped cylinder designed to slip past enemy sensors and deliver its passengers undetected. As they strapped themselves into their crash couches, Sarah closed her eyes and began the mental preparations that would unlock her enhanced abilities. Her breathing slowed to almost nothing, her heartbeat dropping to levels that would have alarmed medical scanners. This was the second stage of her conditioning, a state that allowed her to function at peak efficiency while remaining virtually undetectable to most surveillance systems. The pod launched silently, its trajectory calculated to avoid the pirate ships while approaching Echo 7 from its blind side. Through the small viewports, they could see the station growing larger, its hull scarred with micrometeorite impacts and the wear of years in space. "Something's wrong," Korvex muttered, studying the station's external structure. "Those aren't impact scars. Something was trying to get in." Sarah opened her eyes and studied the damage patterns with enhanced visual acuity. The scarring followed specific lines, tracing pathways that corresponded to internal systems and access points. Whatever had attacked Echo 7 knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. "The pirates didn't do this," she said quietly. "This damage is weeks old, maybe months. Someone else was here first." The implications were staggering. If another faction had attacked Echo 7 before the Crimson Fleet arrived, it meant the station's secrets were known to multiple parties. The mission was becoming more complex by the minute. The pod docked with Echo 7's maintenance bay with barely a whisper of contact. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows through the transparent aluminum viewing ports, revealing an airlock that appeared to be functional despite the station's apparent abandonment. "Atmospheric readings are normal," reported Marcus Webb, checking his scanner. "Pressure's holding, gravity is at standard. Whatever happened here, it didn't compromise life support." Sarah was already analyzing the airlock's control systems, her enhanced training allowing her to understand their function at a glance. The technology was familiar, yet subtly different, incorporating design elements that seemed almost organic in their integration. "The locks have been tampered with," she announced. "Someone has been here recently, and they knew exactly what they were doing." As the team prepared to breach Echo 7, Sarah felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders once more. Everything about this mission suggested they were about to uncover something that would change their understanding of galactic civilization. The mocking voices of her teammates seemed very far away now, replaced by a growing sense that they were all about to discover just how much they didn't know about the universe they thought they understood. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, revealing corridors that stretched into darkness beyond their lights. Echo 7 was waiting for them, its secrets hidden in the shadows, and Sarah Chan was about to prove that humanity's place in the galaxy was far more significant than anyone had ever imagined. Echo 7's corridors stretched before them like the arteries of some vast organism, their walls lined with conduits that pulsed with faint bioluminescent light. The architecture was wrong in ways that made the team instinctively uncomfortable, curves that seemed to flow rather than being constructed, surfaces that appeared to have grown rather than been assembled. Sarah moved through the darkness with fluid grace, her enhanced senses picking up details that her teammates' equipment missed. The air carried traces of ozone and something else, a metallic scent that spoke of active nanotechnology. Her training had prepared her for environments like this, places where the line between technology and biology became meaningless. "Stay in formation," ordered Marcus Webb. "Try to maintain some semblance of military protocol." His voice echoed strangely in the corridors, the sound seeming to bend and twist in ways that defied acoustic physics. Behind them, Thexmore's chitinous armor clinked softly as he moved, his compound eyes scanning for threats. "This place feels wrong," he muttered through the comm system. "Like it's watching us." The Krillian's instincts were more accurate than he knew. Sarah could sense the subtle vibrations in the station's hull, micro-adjustments that suggested Echo 7 was indeed aware of their presence. The technology here was far beyond anything the Coalition had developed, incorporating principles that humanity had only begun to rediscover in the deepest levels of classified research. They reached the first junction, with a main corridor branched into multiple passages leading toward different sections of the station. Standard protocol would have them split up to cover more ground, but Sarah's enhanced awareness was picking up something that made her hesitate. "Wait," she said softly, raising her hand to halt the team's advance. "What is it?" asked Corvex, his massive frame tense for combat. Sarah closed her eyes and extended her perception beyond normal human limits. This was the third stage of her conditioning, a state that allowed her to interface directly with advanced technological systems. The tattoo on her back grew warm as ancient knowledge activated, providing her with understanding that no academy training could have given her. "The station's security system is still active," she announced. "But it's not Coalition technology. It's something else, something much older." Marcus Webb's patience was wearing thin. "Chin, we don't have time for mystical feelings. We need to locate any survivors and secure the research data. That's our mission." But before Sarah could respond, the lights in the corridor shifted from their steady blue glow to a pulsing amber that painted everything in shades of warning. A low harmonic tone echoed through the station's structure, building in intensity until it resonated in their bones. "Movement sensors," reported Thexmore, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Something big is coming our way." The something turned out to be a security drone unlike anything in Coalition databases. It floated down the corridor toward them, its form seeming to shift between solid matter and energy. Weapons platforms emerged from its surface like flowers blooming, each one targeting a different member of the team with lethal precision. "Take cover," shouted Marcus, diving behind a structural support beam that seemed to bend slightly to accommodate his movement. Plasma fire erupted in the corridor as the team engaged the drone. Energy beams that should have destroyed it passed through its shifting form without effect. Kinetic rounds fired by Corvex's heavy cannon simply vanished into what appeared to be some form of dimensional pocket. Sarah remained standing in the open, studying the drone's behavior patterns with enhanced analytical capabilities. The entity wasn't trying to kill them, despite its threatening appearance. Its shots were precisely calculated to miss, hurting them rather than eliminating them. "Cease fire," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Are you insane?" Marcus yelled back, continuing to shoot at their seemingly invulnerable opponent. But Sarah was already moving, walking directly toward the drone with steady, measured steps. Her teammates watched in horror as she approached what they considered certain death, but the security entity's weapons gradually powered down as she drew closer. When she was within arm's reach of the floating construct, Sarah spoke in a language that none of them recognized. The words seemed to flow like water, each syllable carrying harmonics that resonated with the station's structure. The drone responded with its own series of tones, creating a dialogue that sounded more like music than communication. The exchange lasted only moments, but when it was finished, the security drone's form solidified into something more recognizable. It resembled a Coalition maintenance robot, though clearly far more advanced. Its sensors focused on Sarah with what could only be described as respectful attention. "How did you do that?" asked Marcus, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah turned back to her teammates, and for the first time since they'd met her, they saw something in her eyes that made them reconsider everything they thought they knew about her. There was depth there, knowledge that went far beyond anything a recent academy graduate should possess. "The station's security system recognized my clearance," she said simply. "We can proceed, but we need to understand that Echo 7 isn't what we thought it was." The drone led them deeper into the station, through sections that became progressively more alien in their design. Walls curved in impossible directions. Spaces seemed larger on the inside than their external dimensions could accommodate. and technology that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured lined every surface. "Chun," said Corvex quietly, "what kind of clearance could you possibly have for a place like this?" Before she could answer, they entered what had been designated as Echo 7's main research laboratory. The space was vast, far too large to fit within the station's external dimensions. In the center stood a structure that defied immediate comprehension, something that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially elsewhere. "By the sacred fires," breathed Thexmore, his compound eyes reflecting the strange lights that emanated from the central structure. "What is that thing?" Sarah approached the artifact with the reverence of someone encountering something sacred. Her tattoo was now radiating warmth that she could feel through her uniform, the encoded knowledge responding to proximity to its source. This was what she had been prepared for, the moment when humanity's forgotten past would finally be revealed. "It's a gateway," she said, her voice carrying certainty that none of them could question. "A portal to somewhere else, built by the people who came before." The revelation hit them like a physical blow. The Coalition's understanding of galactic history was that intelligent life had evolved independently on thousands of worlds, eventually coming together to form their current civilization. The idea that there had been predecessors, beings advanced enough to build technology like this, challenged everything they believed. "Before who?" asked Marcus, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Sarah began to remove her uniform jacket, revealing the tank top beneath and the edges of the intricate tattoo that covered her back. "Before us. Before any of us. There was a civilization that spanned the galaxy millions of years ago, and they left markers for those who would come after." She turned around, showing them the full extent of the artwork that adorned her back. The tattoo was no mere decoration. It was a star map of incredible precision, showing not just current stellar positions, but historical ones spanning eons. At its center was a representation of Earth, but not as any of them had seen it depicted before. "My God," whispered Marcus, staring at the intricate patterns that seemed to move slightly in the strange light of the gateway. "What are you?" "I'm human," Sarah replied simply. "But I'm also something more. There are others like me, trained to recognize and interact with the technology left by the Forerunners. We've been preparing for the day when these sites would be rediscovered." The implications were staggering. If humans had known about the Forerunners all along, if they had people trained to interface with ancient technology, then humanity's role in the galactic community was far more significant than anyone had realized. Suddenly, the station shuddered as new alarms began to sound. Through the laboratory's viewing ports, they could see the Crimson Fleet Raiders approaching, their hulls glowing with the energy signatures of weapons coming online. "They've detected our presence," announced the security drone in its melodious artificial voice. "The gateway must be protected." Sarah moved to a control panel that seemed to grow from the floor as she approached it. Her hands moved over the interface with practiced certainty, activating systems that responded to her touch like old friends. The station's defenses came online, weapon emplacements emerging from hidden ports throughout its hull. "Chun, how do you know how to operate this?" demanded Thexmore, his military mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. "Because I was trained for this," she replied, her fingers dancing over controls that reorganized themselves to match her needs. "My entire life has been preparation for moments like this." The first pirate ship opened fire, its plasma cannons sending bolts of superheated energy toward Echo 7's hull. But the station's shields activated barriers of force that not only deflected the incoming fire, but seemed to absorb it, converting the energy into power for its own systems. Sarah's teammates watched in amazement as she orchestrated the station's defense with the skill of someone who had been born to the task. Her movements were no longer those of a nervous recruit, but of a master technician working with tools designed specifically for her use. The second stage of the battle began when Echo 7's weapon systems responded. Energy beams of incredible power lanced out from the station, striking the pirate ships with surgical precision. But rather than destroying them outright, the beams seemed to disable their systems, leaving the raiders helpless but intact. "Why aren't we destroying them?" asked Marcus, watching the enemy ships drift powerlessly in space. "Because they're not the real enemy," Sarah replied, her attention focused on readings that appeared in the air before her like three-dimensional displays. "They're just pawns. Someone else is coming, someone who knows what this place really is." As if summoned by her words, space around Echo 7 began to distort. Reality twisted in ways that hurt to look at directly, and from that distortion emerged ships of a design that none of them recognized. They were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to be grown rather than built, their hulls pulsing with the same bioluminescent patterns that lined Echo 7's corridors. "Vanguard ships," Sarah breathed, and for the first time since they'd met her, she sounded truly concerned. "You know what those are?" asked Corvex, his warrior's instincts telling him that these new arrivals represented a threat unlike anything he'd faced before. "They're treasure hunters," Sarah explained, her hands working frantically at the controls. "A faction that's been searching for Forerunner sites for centuries. They know how to use the technology, but they don't understand its true purpose." The Vanguard ships moved with predatory grace, their weapons charging with energies that made space itself seem to bend around them. They ignored the disabled pirate vessels, focusing their attention entirely on Echo 7 and the prize that lay at its heart. "The gateway is starting to activate," announced the security drone, its tone carrying what sounded almost like excitement. "The proximity of so many consciousness patterns is triggering its automated sequences." Behind them, the massive structure at the laboratory's center began to pulse with increasing intensity. Energy patterns that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception started to coalesce, creating a doorway that led somewhere else entirely. Sarah turned to her teammates, and they could see in her eyes the weight of responsibilities they were only beginning to understand. "Everything you think you know about humanity is about to change," she said. "We're not the newcomers to galactic civilization that everyone believes. We're the inheritors of something far greater." The battle for Echo 7 was about to begin in earnest, but it would be fought not just with weapons and technology, but with truths that would shake the foundation of everything the Coalition thought it knew about the universe and humanity's place within it. The gateway's activation sent waves of energy through Echo 7 that made reality itself seem unstable. Sarah's teammates found themselves struggling to maintain their footing as space-time fluctuated around them, while she moved with the confidence of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario. The Vanguard ships opened fire with weapons that bent the laws of physics, energy beams that traveled through folded space to strike their targets instantaneously. Echo 7's shields absorbed the impacts, but Sarah could see the strain building in the station's systems. The ancient technology was powerful, but it had been dormant for eons and wasn't operating at full capacity. "We need to get that gateway fully online," she announced, her hands flying over controls that seemed to anticipate her commands. "It's the only thing powerful enough to deal with a Vanguard fleet." Marcus Webb stared at her with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "How do you know so much about these Vanguard? And what exactly is a gateway supposed to do?" Sarah paused for a moment, weighing how much truth her teammates could handle. The training protocols had always assumed that revelation would come gradually, over months or years of careful preparation. But circumstances were forcing her hand. The Vanguard are descendants of a species that served the Forerunners millions of years ago, she explained, her attention split between the conversation and the complex activation sequences flowing through her mind. When the Forerunners vanished, the Vanguard became obsessed with recovering their technology. They've been systematically looting Forerunner sites across the galaxy for millennia. And gateways, pressed Thexmore, his compound eyes tracking the enemy ships through the laboratory's viewing ports. "Transportation networks," Sarah replied simply. "The Forerunners built them to connect distant parts of the galaxy instantaneously. But they're more than just travel devices. They're also weapons, capable of manipulating space-time on a massive scale. The implications of her words hung in the air like a physical presence. If humanity had access to technology that could manipulate space-time, then every assumption about military balance in the galaxy would have to be reconsidered. A new alarm sounded as one of the Vanguard ships broke through Echo 7's outer defenses. The vessel was smaller than its companions, built for infiltration rather than direct assault. It attached itself to the station's hull like a parasite, and they could feel vibrations through the deck plating as something began cutting through the outer barriers. "Boarding party," announced the security drone, its melodious voice carrying new urgency. "They're attempting to access the primary control systems." Sarah's expression hardened with determination that seemed far beyond her apparent years. "Corvex, Fexmore, defend the approaches to this laboratory. Don't let anyone reach the gateway controls. Marcus, you're with me. We're going to meet our visitors." "Chun, wait." Marcus grabbed her arm as she started toward the laboratory's exit. "Weren't you telling us? How can you possibly know how to operate Forerunner technology?" She looked at him with eyes that held depths of experience he was only beginning to glimpse. "Because my ancestors helped build it." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. If humans had been involved in constructing Forerunner technology, it meant their species was far older and more significant than anyone had imagined. It also explained the peculiarities in Sarah's training and the classified sections of her personnel file. "That's impossible," Marcus breathed. "Human civilization is only a few thousand years old." "Modern human civilization," Sarah corrected. "But our species is much older than that. Most of our history was deliberately hidden, buried beneath layers of myth and legend. The program that trained me exists to preserve the truth and prepare for the day when it would be needed again." They moved through Echo 7's corridors with Sarah leading the way, her enhanced senses guiding them toward the breach point where the Vanguard infiltrators were entering the station. The architecture around them continued to shift and change, walls flowing like liquid to create new passages and seal off others according to Sarah's mental commands. "The station is responding to you," Marcus observed, watching structural elements reorganize themselves to facilitate their movement. Forerunner technology was designed to interface directly with consciousness, Sarah explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone reciting long-memorized lessons. "It recognizes patterns of thought and genetic markers that identify authorized users. The tattoo on my back isn't just a map. It's a neural interface that allows me to communicate with their systems on a fundamental level." They reached the breach point to find that the Vanguard had already cut through 3 levels of security barriers. The infiltrators themselves were unlike anything in Coalition records, beings that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially elsewhere. Their forms shifted constantly, making it difficult to focus on them directly. "Phase shifters," Sarah identified, raising her weapon with steady hands. "They can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which makes them nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons." "Nearly impossible?" Marcus asked, taking cover behind a structural support that reformed itself to provide better protection. Sarah's response was to fire her modified plasma rifle, but not at the Vanguard infiltrators directly. Instead, she targeted specific points in the corridor structure, areas where the exotic matter that composed the station's hull was most concentrated. The energy beams interacted with that matter in ways that created dimensional instabilities, forcing the phase shifters back into normal space where they could be targeted. The battle that followed was like nothing Marcus had ever experienced. Sarah moved through the combat zone with impossible grace, her actions seeming to anticipate enemy movements before they occurred. Her weapon never seemed to run low on energy, drawing power directly from the station's systems through connections that shouldn't have existed. But it was her tactical awareness that truly set her apart. She understood the flow of battle in 3 dimensions, using the station's malleable architecture to create advantages and eliminate enemy positions. Walls moved at her command, creating barriers where needed and opening firing lanes when opportunities presented themselves. "Behind you," Marcus shouted, spotting a phase shifter materializing near Sarah's position. She spun without apparent haste, her rifle already tracking to the target before it fully manifested. The energy beam struck the infiltrator's center of mass, its exotic properties disrupting whatever dimensional manipulation allowed the being to exist outside normal space. The Vanguard warrior collapsed, its form stabilizing into something vaguely humanoid, but clearly artificial. "Android constructs," Sarah identified, examining the fallen enemy. "The real Vanguard don't risk themselves on operations like this. They send expendable servants to do the dangerous work." As they fought their way back toward the laboratory, Marcus found himself seeing Sarah Chun in an entirely new light. The quiet, seemingly fragile woman who had endured mockery from her teammates was revealing herself to be something far more extraordinary than any of them had imagined. "Chun," he said during a brief lull in the fighting, "who are you really?" She reloaded her weapon with practiced efficiency before answering. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chun, as my records state. But I'm also a legacy guardian, one of a group of humans trained to interface with Forerunner technology and protect it from those who would misuse it. We've been preparing for this day for thousands of years. How many of you are there?" "Enough," she replied, cryptically. "Scattered across human space, embedded in military units, research institutions, and exploration fleets, waiting for the moment when the ancient sites would start awakening." They reached the laboratory to find Corvex and Fexmore holding defensive positions while more Vanguard androids attempted to breach the chamber. The massive Vorthak warrior was using his kinetic hammer to devastating effect, each impact creating shockwaves that disrupted the enemy's phase-shifting abilities. Meanwhile, Fexmore's plasma projectors were firing in precise patterns that seemed to anticipate enemy movements. "They're learning our tactics," Fexmore reported, his mandibles clicking with frustration. "These machines adapt faster than anything we've faced before." Sarah assessed the situation with the enhanced analytical abilities of her training. The Vanguard androids were indeed adapting, their behavioral algorithms evolving in real time to counter the team's defensive strategies. But they had a weakness that their creators probably hadn't anticipated. Moving to the Gateway's control interface, Sarah began inputting commands that would have been impossible for anyone without her specialized training. The ancient technology responded to her touch like a musical instrument, creating harmonies of energy that resonated through the station structure. "What are you doing?" demanded Marcus, maintaining covering fire while keeping one eye on Sarah's activities. "Teaching them a lesson about the difference between using Forerunner technology and understanding it," she replied, her fingers dancing over controls that reconfigured themselves to match her needs. The Gateway's activation sequence accelerated beyond normal parameters, energy building to levels that made the air itself crackle with potential. But rather than opening a doorway to distant space, Sarah was directing that energy through Echo 7 systems, turning the entire station into a massive weapon. Space around the facility began to distort as the Gateway's power reached critical levels. The Vanguard ships found their movements becoming sluggish as local space-time was manipulated to create zones of temporal differential. What appeared to be seconds to the defenders stretched into minutes for the attackers, giving Echo 7's defensive systems time to target and disable the enemy vessels. "Impossible," came a transmission from the Vanguard fleet commander, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested artificial origin. "No species in this galaxy understands dimensional manipulation at that level." Sarah activated the station's external communication systems, her voice carrying across space with authority that seemed to come from eons of accumulated knowledge. "You're wrong. We understand it because we helped create it. Humanity has returned, and we reclaim what was always ours." The effect of her words on both the enemy fleet and her own teammates was immediate and profound. The Vanguard ships began withdrawing, their commanders apparently recognizing that they faced something far beyond their ability to combat. Meanwhile, Corvex, Fexmore, and Marcus stared at Sarah with expressions that mixed awe with a growing realization of what her presence in their unit actually meant. But the revelation was far from over. As the gateway stabilized at full power, its surface began displaying images that showed the true scope of Forerunner civilization. Star systems connected by networks of similar devices, worlds transformed by technology that made current galactic civilization look primitive by comparison. And at the center of it all, a blue-green planet that was unmistakably Earth. "The Cradle World," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with emotions that seemed to span millennia. "Where it all began, and where it will begin again." The implications were staggering. If Earth was the origin point of foreign civilization, then humanity wasn't just another species that had stumbled onto galactic civilization. They were the inheritors of the galaxy's greatest empire, returning after eons of exile to reclaim their birthright. As the last Vanguard ship disappeared into hyperspace, Sarah turned to face her teammates. The woman they had mocked as weak and inexperienced was revealing herself to be something far more significant than any of them had imagined, and they were only beginning to understand the true scope of what they had discovered. The silence that followed the Vanguard fleet's retreat was profound, broken only by the gentle hum of the gateway as it maintained its connection to the vast network of Forerunner technology scattered across the galaxy. Sarah stood before the massive construct, her small frame dwarfed by the artifact's immensity, yet somehow seeming to command its attention through invisible bonds of consciousness and purpose. Marcus Webb, Corvex, and Fexmore found themselves grappling with revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization. The quiet woman they had dismissed as unqualified was revealing herself to be part of something far greater than any of them had imagined. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, using her first name for the first time since they'd met. "What happens now? If what you're telling us is true, if humans really are the descendants of the Forerunners, then the entire balance of power in the galaxy is about to shift." She turned from the gateway's controls, and they could see in her expression the weight of responsibilities that spanned not just years, but millennia. "It's already shifting," she replied. "Sites like Echo 7 are awakening all across human space. My people have been monitoring dozens of them, waiting for the moment when they would respond to our presence." "Your people," repeated Fexmore, his compound eyes reflecting the strange lights emanating from the ancient technology. "How many humans know the truth about their heritage?" "More than you might expect," Sarah answered. "The Legacy Guardian program has existed in various forms for thousands of years. We've been teachers, explorers, historians, and soldiers, always maintaining the knowledge and preparing for the day when it would be needed again." She moved to another control interface that flowed up from the floor at her approach, her hands beginning new sequences that caused the gateway's energy patterns to shift and reorganize. But it's not just about awakening old technology. The Forerunners didn't disappear. They evolved beyond the need for physical form. They've been waiting for their descendants to develop enough to rejoin them. The implications of her words were staggering. If the original Forerunners still existed in some form, then contact with them would represent the most significant event in galactic history. It would also explain why the Gateway Network had remained dormant for so long, waiting for the right moment to become active. "What about the Coalition?" asked Corvex, his warrior's mind already calculating the political ramifications. "How will the other species react when they learn that humans have access to technology that makes their greatest achievements look primitive?" Sarah's expression grew thoughtful as she considered the question. "Some will be frightened. Others will be angry. A few will try to take what we've rediscovered by force. But many will recognize that this changes everything for the better." She gestured toward the viewing ports, where the disabled Crimson Fleet ships were beginning to drift away under auxiliary power. "The pirates who led us here, for example, they weren't just looking for salvage. Someone hired them to investigate sites like Echo 7, someone who suspected what might be hidden here." "The Vanguard," suggested Marcus. "Possibly, but I suspect the truth is more complex." There are factions within several coalition species that have been searching for Forerunner sites for decades. They know something is changing, that ancient powers are stirring. Our emergence was inevitable once the sites started awakening. The gateway's energy patterns suddenly shifted, and new displays materialized in the air around them. Three-dimensional star maps showed the locations of active Forerunner sites across the galaxy, each one pulsing with increasing intensity as the network came online. Magnificent, breathed the security drone, its artificial consciousness apparently capable of appreciation for the technology it was designed to protect. The network is achieving full synchronization for the first time in 3 million years. Sarah nodded, her hands working over controls that seemed to anticipate her commands. The awakening is accelerating. Within days, every major Forerunner site in the galaxy will be active and responsive to human consciousness. And then what? Asked Thexmore. Despite his alien nature, the Krillian warrior was beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Then we contact the coalition leadership and begin the process of integration, Sarah replied. Humanity rejoins galactic civilization not as newcomers seeking acceptance, but as the inheritors of its greatest technological achievements. She paused in her work, turning to face her teammates with an expression that mixed determination with something that might have been sadness. But first, we need to deal with the immediate consequences of what's happened here. Word of this will spread quickly, and not everyone will welcome the revelation. As if summoned by her words, the station's communication systems activated with an incoming transmission. The holographic display showed Captain Vasquez aboard the Shadow's Edge, her expression tense with concern. Strike Team Omega, report status immediately. We're picking up massive energy readings from your position, and long-range sensors are detecting ships moving toward the Marden system from multiple directions. Sarah stepped forward to respond, her posture straightening with authority that seemed to come from deep within her genetic heritage. Captain, this is Lieutenant Shun. Echo 7 has been secured, but the situation has become more complex than anticipated. We've made contact with technology that requires immediate reporting to Coalition High Command. Vasquez's eyes narrowed as she studied Sarah through the transmission. Something about the young woman's demeanor had changed fundamentally since the mission began. Explain, Lieutenant. Echo 7 is a Forerunner facility, Captain. Active Forerunner technology that responds to human genetic patterns. The implications for Coalition security are significant. The captain was quiet for a long moment, processing information that challenged her understanding of galactic history. Are you telling me that this research station was built by the Forerunners? That's impossible. Every xenoarchaeologist in the Coalition has studied their ruins. Forerunner technology has been dead for millions of years. Not dead, Captain. Sleeping. And it's awakening now in response to humanity's expansion into galactic civilization. Before Vasquez could respond, new alarms sounded throughout Echo 7. The station's sensors were detecting multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their configurations suggesting a mix of coalition and non-coalition vessels. We have company, announced Marcus, studying the tactical displays that were materializing around the laboratory. Coalition Navy ships, but also vessels from the hegemony, the Free Traders Alliance, and at least 3 unidentified configurations. Sarah's expression hardened with determination. Word is already spreading. Someone monitored our communications or detected the energy signatures when the gateway activated. Every major faction in the galaxy is going to know what we've found here. She moved back to the gateway's primary control interface, her hands beginning new sequences that caused the massive construct to pulse with renewed energy. We need to establish contact with other Guardian teams before this situation spirals out of control. The air around the gateway began to shimmer as new connections formed across the galactic network. Images flashed through the energy patterns, showing other Forerunner sites and the Guardian teams that were activating them. Sarah's teammates could see humans working with technology that defied comprehension, their actions coordinated with precision that suggested long preparation for this moment. There are others like you all across the galaxy, observed Corvex, watching the images with fascination. Hundreds of us, Sarah confirmed, embedded in exploration fleets, research teams, and military units just like yours. We've been waiting for the network to reach critical mass, for enough sites to activate that the old connections could be re-established. A new voice joined their conversation, transmitted through the gateway's communication systems from somewhere far across the galaxy. It spoke with authority that carried the weight of eons, though the words were in perfectly comprehensible human language. The children have returned to claim their inheritance. The long exile is ending. Sarah's teammates found themselves face-to-face with evidence that the Forerunners had not vanished but had evolved into something beyond their current understanding. The voice continued, its tone carrying warmth that suggested vast intelligence, guided by genuine affection for humanity. The younger species have grown wise in their own ways. Integration will benefit all, but it must be accomplished carefully. There are those who will resist the changes that are coming. We understand, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life. The Guardian protocols are already in motion. We'll work with the coalition leadership to ensure a smooth transition. And if they refuse, asked Marcus, voicing the question that all of them were thinking. The Forerunner consciousness seemed to consider the question with attention that spanned multiple levels of reality. Then, humanity will remember what it means to be the inheritors of the galaxy's greatest civilization. The choice of integration or dominance will be theirs to make. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. If humanity chose to assert their technological superiority rather than working within existing galactic structures, the result would be a fundamental reorganization of power that would affect every sentient species in known space. Outside Echo 7, the gathering fleet of ships from multiple factions maintained careful distances from each other, but their weapons remained powered and their shields raised. Everyone was waiting to see what would emerge from the ancient station that was broadcasting energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. We need to get back to the Shadow's Edge, Sarah announced, beginning shutdown sequences for the systems she had activated. This situation requires delicate handling, and Captain Vasquez will need to understand what she's dealing with before we encounter the other fleets. As they prepare to leave the laboratory, Thexmore approached Sarah with something that might have been respect in his posture. I owe you an apology, Lieutenant. We all do. We judged you based on appearances and failed to recognize what you truly represent. Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young woman they had first met aboard the transport ship. You weren't wrong to be skeptical, but I hope you understand now that humanity's place in the galaxy is more complex than anyone realized. More complex, agreed Corvex, and infinitely more significant. As Strike Team Omega made their way back to the Shadow's Edge, the Gateway maintained its connection to the vast network of Forerunner technology scattered across the galaxy. Each activated site sent signals that were being received and analyzed by civilizations that were only beginning to understand that their fundamental assumptions about galactic history were about to be challenged. The mockery that Sarah had endured from her teammates seemed like something from another lifetime, a brief moment of misunderstanding before the revelation of truths that would reshape the galaxy. The quiet woman who had seemed so unremarkable was revealing herself to be a key figure in humanity's emergence as the inheritors of the greatest technological civilization in galactic history. And, in the depths of space, ancient intelligences stirred with anticipation as their long-lost children prepared to take their rightful place among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity was about to discover that their greatest adventures were only just beginning.